Guys, if you live in Sherman Oaks, California, and you're thinking about buying or selling a home in 2026, ignore the national headlines because our market is behaving differently. Mortgage rates are shifting in the right direction, affordability is looking to improve, and that combination is quietly changing buyer behavior. I work with Sherman Oaks homeowners, buyers, and sellers every day, and in this video, I'm gonna break down what's really happening, including what the government is doing to help buyers, how mortgage rates are impacting your selling strategy, and what sellers need to do and know to take advantage of this market, right? If you find this helpful, please like this video, subscribe, and please comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts. And don't forget to download my buyer and seller guide linked in the description. It is packed with tips for navigating the Sherman Oaks real estate market. All right, guys, let's get into it. All right, hang in there with me. I'm gonna talk about the Sherman Oaks market, but for now, if you don't mind, let's talk about the US housing market, which if you've been following, mortgage rates dipped to below 6%, 5.99%. The government announced intentions to buy $200 billion worth of mortgage-backed security. And in August, reports came out that the new home sales jumped 20% year over year, a sign that buyer behavior is responding to affordability. At the same time, the share of US mortgages above 6% has surpassed those below 3%. And as the third quarter of 2025, 21.2% of residential mortgages in the US had an interest rate of 6% or higher compared to 20% with mortgages at a rate below 3%, which means rates have trended to the lower 6% range and buyers have increased purchasing behavior, or owners have refinanced to consolidate, and the lock-in effect, and those with the 3% mortgage are likely to remain on the sidelines, right? The government has also announced in the past couple of months the idea of a 50-year mortgage, 10% limit on credit card rates, and a ban on large institutional investors from snapping up entry-level homes, all to help buyers re-enter the market and making it easier to purchase a home. And while several of these initiatives may never come to fruition or may not matter, something's better than nothing, and we are moving in the right direction. All right, so what does this mean for Sherman Oaks real estate? Unlike other markets in the US, Sherman Oaks, really the largest majority of buyers are not speculators or investors, right? It's a family, it's a lifestyle and school-focused market, and demand doesn't vanish, it only waits, right? If you look at the amount of transactions across multiple price points towards the end of last year, you can see that lower mortgage rates and easing affordability are beginning to get some buyers off the fence. And let me tell you why. People have short memories in general, and they remember the most recent events more than they do events from the past. And if there's one thing that was true over the past 4 to 5 years in residential real estate in Los Angeles, is when the market responds, prices can rise quickly. And that means buyers can start to get antsy, think to themselves, maybe now's the time to go in and negotiate, because once rates get into the middle 5% range, they'll have even more competition and pay a higher price. So to gain more clarity, let's look at the payment differential, of a $1.1 million mortgage at 6 3/4 and 6%, which characterizes the change in rates over the past year, right? So just the move from 6 3/4 to 6 changes the monthly payment by $536 a month. And that's a real difference, right? If rates get to 5 3/4, that's $716 per month. So you can see how this downward shift in rates, can change monthly payments significantly, which directly affects buyer confidence. And in a market like Sherman Oaks, confidence drives activity faster than minor price changes. All right, so let's look at buyer strategy. So the buyers that I'm seeing right now in Sherman Oaks have begun to change their behavior, right? Moving from uninterested and deliberate to, starting to take more action, right? They're beginning to move when they see value and it aligns with the lifestyle that they want at a price they can afford. So if you've been watching my Sherman Oaks market updates, if not, please subscribe to the channel. I do it every month. If you've seen them, you saw that as the year went along, almost all price ranges, we started to see a larger percentage of the available inventory go under contract. And to be fair, many of the buyers out there still believe that rates will come down in the high 4 to low 5% range at some point in the future, right? So locking in a great piece of real estate, at a fair price is always at the forefront of their minds. Now, in terms of the largest buyer demographic, we're still talking young families, the millennials, who are priced out of the West Side and are, being given family money to help live a better life, right? Some are move-up buyers with dual incomes, selling their condo or their townhome and putting in a large down payment, obviously to help with affordability. And some are just long-term renters who see themselves living here for the long run and don't want to make the high lease payments every month, right? The common thread, buyers act when the math works, and that's why when rates drop, even a balanced market can see an increase in activity. All right, let's talk about seller strategies. So if you're a seller of a home in Sherman Oaks in 2026, here's what you need to know moving forward, right? The COVID market that we saw between 21 and 22 is not coming back anytime soon, if ever. And if you look back at the past couple of years, you'll see that once rates doubled in 2022, we saw a quick pullback in the market, right? But shortly after, the market picked back up again and people surprisingly continued to buy homes, right? Moving into 2023 same, 24 same, and we did see some price change, and especially in the upper end as buyer demand waned and new houses kept coming to market. But in 25 we saw the most notable changes, right? First we had the LA fires, which many sellers thought would increase their home values in Sherman Oaks, which it did not. We had insurability issues that lingered. More homes were tagged as high fire zones, and with higher prices, expensive property taxes, rising insurance costs, we started to see a sluggish market. And once the sweeping tariff announcements came, that felt like the straw that broke the camel's back, right? All of a sudden there were tremendous uncertainty and the flow of money slowed, and not just in real estate, right? Mergers and acquisitions, private equity deals, they all took a beat to see what the future held. And for those sellers who needed to sell in 2025, they had to drop their prices. And, as a result, for the first time in a long time, we saw price declines across the board. So the $1 million question is, what's a 50 basis point drop in rates? How much of a change is that going to be for buyers in Sherman Oaks? I hate to say the answer is it's not going to make that big of a difference, but there are things that you can still do to get your home ready, how to price your home, prepare your home for sale, unless it's a fixer, right? Arguably the market value of your home is based on how many buyers would walk through in your home and say, I can live here, right? And let's be honest, all buyers are going to be able to say that at the right price, but how do you go about maximizing the value of the home and also get a buyer to say, I can live here? Let's dive into those. All right, we're gonna get into pricing detail in a minute. Please do not miss this important part. But before we go to pricing, we're gonna talk about taking care of deferred maintenance, right? We're gonna start with something that seems small and obvious, but it actually makes a huge difference, right? Deferred maintenance is one of the first things that buyers notice. There's the little repairs that you've probably been putting off for months or years. Things like holes in the wall, cracked drywall, caulking that's cracked in the bathroom, clogged gutters, doors that don't open and close, stains, water damage, and you might walk past those every day and think, it's fine, and like the buyer is going to do their stuff anyways. But like the crazy thing is in the buyer's head that like those little repairs, it makes them think that there's more wrong with the house. So the first thing you want to do is make a list of like all these little things around your home and start fixing them. Hire a handyman, patch the holes, caulk the tubs, clean the gutters, whatever it takes. The more of these little things, that you knock out, the smoother your selling process is going to be, because it's going to change the perceptions that the buyer have as soon as they walk in. Number 2 is declutter like a pro, right? Decluttering, and I don't just mean shoving a few, things into a drawer and closets. I mean, really going through your home and asking yourself, do I need this right now? Do I need this piece of furniture? Do I need this piece of art? Declutter. You know, are you selling, right? You know, when a buyer walks in and it's decluttered and it has so much personalization in it, they can't get a sense of the space, right? They prefer it to be organized and clean. And also, when you remove all this stuff, it makes the buyer feel like the home is so much bigger. So start early, box things up that you don't need, even if it's a few months early, put them in the garage or the attic or the storage space. You know, you can unpack them after you move. The key is to give the buyers a chance to imagine themselves living in your home, and decluttering is one of the most powerful things you can do. All right, number 3, brightening up your room, lighting. Okay, guys, this is huge. Buyers are expecting energy and light and bright and happy homes, and if your home's dark and there's heavy window coverings and it's dark and you have to turn lights on, it's just uninviting, right? So the blinds and curtains, get rid of them if you can. The dark heavy curtains, replace them with lighter ones if you need curtains. You know, repaint dark colored walls, swap out dark colored rugs for lighter ones. And when showings happen, have the lights on. You want it to feel a certain way, and I get people are worried about the electricity bill, but like the emotional impact of a bright sunlit room, it makes the buyer feel a certain way. And buyers, you know, they're paying based on a feeling. So number 4, update key areas, right? You've got to think about the kitchens, bathroom floors, hardware, basically, you know, the areas that buyers inspect first and hardest. Like for kitchens, even if everything works, if the cabinets, countertops, and handles are outdated, you know, buyers mentally start calculating hundreds of thousands of dollars in renovations. So if you have the budget, make some changes. Hardware, painting the cabinets, all those little things, light switches, face plates, you know, if they're old or mismatched or outdated, you know, it could send the wrong message. There's all these little small updates that you can make that can have a massive impact. Leave the kitchen, leave the baths, do everything else, you know, floors and walls and lighting. It'll make a huge difference. Number 5, of course, is amp up your curb appeal. Let's talk about the exterior, because buyers are forming their first impression before they even walk through the door. You know, in LA, curb appeals everything, right? So think about your front yard, your landscaping, your front door, trim the bushes, mow the lawn, add fresh mulch, pressure wash the siding, and if the front door paint is old, paint it, right? Give it a fresh coat. Even a new welcome mat can make a difference, right? So buyers, they make snap judgments, right? And those first impressions stick, right? So if they see an overgrown yard or a door that looks neglected, it just colors their perspective on the whole house, right? If you take the time to make the first impression clean, bright, inviting, the rest of the showing feels positive. And number 6, depersonalize your home. If you can't move out and you got to live in there, remove the personal touches. Buyers in LA, they want to see themselves living in the home and not feel like they're stepping into someone else's life, right? So box up family photos, collectibles, personalized decorations, everything that screams this belongs to somebody else, right? Store it safely while your home's on the market. Feels a little awkward, a little sad, but it's worth it, right? The goal is to make it easy for buyers to imagine their own furniture, their own life in your space. And when they can do that, they're much more likely to make an offer. All right, this is the most important one, guys. Pricing fairly, right? Price is a strategy that most sellers and agents treat. You know, they treat price as an outcome when in reality it's a strategy, right? It's a conversation starter. It's how the seller chooses to engage the market, right? When a home is priced, you're not setting its value, you're inviting a conversation to discover its value, right? So let's talk about how pricing works when it comes to the selling of real estate, right? Let's talk about the science of pricing first. The goal is to start a conversation with a number that is believable and sometimes not necessarily to you, but the active buyers, the market, right? Because believability is what creates engagement, and engagement shows up as calls, showings, inquiries, and offers, right? And engagement leads to momentum, right? Momentum leads to competition, and competition is ultimately what drives your home to sell for the highest price. Let's talk about auction analogy, right? When it comes to pricing, think about an auction. If the opening bid is too high, no one raises their paddle and the room goes silent, right? No engagement, no discovery, no sale. But when the opening bid feels believable, people start raising their paddle. And that's when value is discovered, right? You don't start where you hope to go, you open where buyers believe. The counterintuitive truth. If a home may be worth between 3 to 3.5, and the best way to get there, it may not be to list it for 4 million and hope rather below 3 million and let the market push it up. That may sound crazy and counterintuitive. This is just an example, right? But that's how decision making works, right? Most sellers think, let's start high, leave room to come down in price, but the high price kills the engagement before it starts, right? If you want to get the highest number, you have to start with the lowest number that you can possibly stomach, right? Because once competition starts, buyers shift from a hope of gain to a fear of loss, right? And that fear of loss is what drives the decisions. The buyer who doesn't want to lose your home the most is the one who's going to pay the most for it. Probability versus possibility, right? When it comes to pricing, there's possibility and there's probability. Possibility is based on hope. Maybe someone will show up and pay my number, you know? Probability is based on science, right? Stacking the odds in your favor through believability and engagement, right? You can hope that someone shows up and pays you what you want, or, you know, you can do the things that increase the odds that they will, like pricing your home fairly. And number 6 is aligning with human behavior, right? Human beings make decisions through believability, not persuasion, right? Thinking of price as a conversation starter aligns your strategy with the science of how people make decisions, right? Starting high ignores that science, and starting where sellers believe, that's how you win, because that's how we discover where alignment truly exists between your expectations, buyer perceptions, and the market reality. And that's when we know when the price is right. So be careful with your pricing strategy in 2026. It is going to be, for many of you, the difference between earning thousands and thousands of dollars more on the sale of your home and losing thousands and thousands of dollars. All right, guys, so we're wrapping it up here. The big picture, okay, Sherman Oaks remains supply constrained for the most part and lifestyle driven. Buyers are coming back, but they're smart, selective, and they're deliberate, right? So the winners are gonna be the homeowners who understand the changing behavior over the headlines. They're gonna prepare their homes intentionally and price it strategically. So, you know, every home and every buyer and every seller is different, I get that. And strategy beats timing. If you want a clear conversation about, you know, your options in Sherman Oaks, I would be happy to help. No pressure, just clarity based on experience and data. Remember, download the buyer and seller guide in the description below. Subscribe for updates and comment if you'd like some advice on a specific topic or neighborhood. You know, the takeaway is simple. In 2026, making your home look good, smart pricing, strong presentation, and you'll win. And when you align with how, you know, the Sherman Oaks market reality is working, the results will follow. Take care, guys. See you soon.